Welcome to Workers Rock, a podcast that explores this truth that we have the power to change the culture of employment across the globe. I'm Emerette Miller, the host of Workers Rock. Workers Rock is part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network. All right. Welcome, Nadia Harris of remoteworkadvocate.com. How are you today in London right now?
I'm doing good. Thanks a lot. Spring is approaching, so definitely in a great mood.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you for joining us. Nadia, you are an advocate for remote and hybrid workers. When did this start?
Well, it started a long time before the pandemic. That's something that I definitely have to say. It was a time when nobody believed in it. Nobody knew what I was talking about. Like, oh, she's delusional. Like, what? Everybody needs to go to an office. I mean, that's normal. But I had this thought at that time that, well, people should be able to have a job and a great job at a company, at a great company where they want to work, regardless where they currently live or where they come from, because we have the technology today that enables all that. And that
Right.
was the major reason for me to start doing what I do right now.
Were you working remote before the pandemic yourself?
Yes, I started in 2015. I lived in the States at that time. I lived in
Wow.
Connecticut. Yeah, and I got
Posh,
my
posh. That's like
yeah.
special.
Oh, well, I was looking for a job and I was like applying everywhere and everywhere. I mean, I don't know where I was applying literally. And I got this remote opportunity back then. And I thought it was a scam, like work from home at that time, etc. It said remote. I don't even remember. But then I thought, oh, that must be a scam. You can't make money this way. So that was my mindset. But very
Yeah.
quickly I realized that, oh, that wasn't really the case.
Yeah. For me, 4 years ago, I was thrust into a remote role. I was hired into a job and it was supposed to be probably one work from home day. And it was on March 9th, 2020. And then boom, like a week later, COVID hit and we were like remote for 2 whole years.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a lot of us are used to it now, but before COVID, it wasn't really as popular as it is now.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, people got pulled out of their comfort zones during COVID. That's right. But I mean, so it did broaden horizons, if I can say that that's one of the like good things. I mean, that happened within the past few years, if at all. But the bad thing is actually that remote work is a much broader concept that primarily relies on flexibility, which is everything that wasn't happening during the pandemic because it was, I call it a forced work from home experiment. Um,
Ah.
Not flexibility, right? And not a
hmm
choice.
because we had to protect ourselves for health reasons. But now that we're out of it 4 years later, in a way, certain companies are still holding on to this model, which is great to see. Do you think that it's still growing?
Definitely it is. It depends on the market. I mean, there are loads of amazing remote first companies that were also remote before.
Mm.
Funnily enough, and I mean, sadly at the same time, these companies don't preach out loud about, oh, we are, so remote and that's how it's always been part of our DNA. There are just a few key players, but many of them, they don't like, engage in any of these conversations that you have with all the media or the big return to office pushback is happening. And that makes me a little bit upset because there's so much value there. And I also see that there are many companies transitioning to either hybrid or remote. And it's definitely happening. But I don't think that the narrative is being shared the way it should.
Mhm.
Because there are many more opportunities, even if we check the statistics, way more than before.
Who do you think is driving that, messaging to the media that says, oh, companies are telling people to come back? Because it's not necessarily true for all companies. Are there like firms that drive these messages across media? Like, how does that work, do you think?
Yeah, so I mean, it's definitely connected to the real estate industry. And I mean, and it's not because I say so, it's really, if we take a look at all the global statistics right now and all the recent data, we will see that there's a huge decline in real estate, especially in big cities,
Mm, right.
which is obviously like super problematic from a financial perspective, because I think Bloomberg recently shared a video that is really interesting to watch. I think it's on YouTube about how real estate was financed in all these office buildings in the past, and that right now it's basically just a lot of debt, right?
Mhm.
Which is obviously an issue. And, there are big players on the market that will, don't want to lose that money. And in addition to that, the whole problem that's happening, it's not just the office buildings, but, people started realizing during the pandemic that they can move out of a big city, which is super expensive to live in. And for the same amount of money that they used to pay for rent, they can buy a house or rent the house elsewhere, and just, have much better living conditions. So why should they sacrifice that and all that's most important to them? So obviously, I see, the way we had mass migrations
Mhm.
100, 200 years ago from rural areas to cities because of opportunity. Well, now the people see things differently, and it's a huge shift that's happening right now.
Oh, yes, 100%. Here in Rochester, New York, we're upstate New York. I believe there's an incentive for remote workers to actually move here. There's like a nominal amount of money they'll be paid. In our downtown, it used to be bustling with storefronts and such. And now those same buildings that used to house corporations and companies, they're being turned into apartments. So more people are moving downtowns, so less of downtown being what it used to be, but now they're becoming actual communities where people live.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm glad that you're mentioning this because I mean that's actually happening, right? If somebody can have a much higher value, then why should they compromise in that case? It's just once you taste it and you know how great that is, you just don't want to go back to something that you just see doesn't really work for you, and that's the big challenge today.
Yeah, like in my life, I've interviewed for jobs remotely. I am not gonna get a job if I interview with you today because you see I'm in a rocking chair. I have no pictures behind me. I look kind of like I'm gonna sew a sweater. But
Oh
if
God.
I were to interview for a remote job, like what are some of the tips? Because I'm looking at you, you've got pictures behind you, your lighting is good, you're all put together. What are some of the things that you'd recommend for somebody who's looking for work, a remote job that they do in their interview to show that they're sort of fit for the job?
I mean, I'm more virtual than real, so that's just something that I do to begin with. So I mean,
Yeah.
don't look at me. And I mean,
Uh,
I was an interviewer multiple times for for remote roles. So I definitely, if you have the expertise, I'd hire you, and it doesn't matter where you're sitting.
okay.
By the way, a recent client of mine that I work with today, I had my final call with them when I was at the airport flying to Paris because that was
Mm.
the only slot they had. They need to hire immediately, and I said, "Well, I'm so sorry, but that's just I have my noise cancellation on my headphones, but I just don't know how this is going to go, and that's going to be perceived super unprofessional." They said, "No, no,
Mhm.
no, we don't care." So I was like, "Okay, was your choice. I informed you, and well, that worked out super well." But
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. That's the world we live in now. I'm going to London next week and I was like, "Oh, maybe I should get with Nadia next week instead of this week." But, we got the remote access now. But I work a hybrid model in my job, my day job, and I particularly enjoy it. It's good for my son. I feel that I'm able to get him out the door like a human being every morning. It does cut down on the commute time and getting dressed and just it just helps mentally, I think. What are some of the benefits of remote work for people?
oh goodness, maybe let me say it this way. If a company doesn't offer remote, flexible, hybrid, that is basically the same thing as discrimination. Okay,
Mhm.
discrimination for women because
Right.
when you look at women and also taking into account the fact that they're caregivers primarily because that's the case, especially when they have children, they
Mhm.
often need to make sacrifices in that case because it's obviously very challenging. Also, look at the daycare costs in the US. I mean, you're well aware of what that looks like. I recently spent some time in Switzerland and I was shocked to actually find out that children in Switzerland, they have a break during the day, I think a 2 or 3 hour break, where normally,
Mm.
they go home and the moms stay home because they have to pick up the child for 3 hours, feed the child so that the child can go back to school, which is
Wow.
ridiculous, or,
Yes.
or it's super expensive to hire someone like a nanny just for 3 hours. I mean, that is really
Right.
ridiculous. And I spoke to friends of mine who live there, and they said, well, it is basically something that everyone knows, that most women, when there are children, from the age of, I don't know, 6 till 12 or whatever, they just don't work. They stay home. And I'm like, this is completely ridiculous.
Wow.
So that's the thing. So that would be, so for women, it's a benefit. For caregivers, it's a benefit. For disabled people, I mean, it's not only a
Oh, yeah.
benefit, it's right. It's a no brainer,
Oh,
um,
100%.
right? And of course, the commute as well. The fact
Mhm.
that you are not wasting that much time in traffic. Look what's happening. It's great for the environment. From an individual perspective, if people know how to develop their boundaries as well, and also healthy working habits and their routines, it's also much more beneficial. I recently read statistics about office spaces, by the way, open office spaces. So the opposite concept of, and I mean, everything that, is now related to the return to office. I read statistics. I can't tell you which university that was, but they did a really deep research sharing that 90% of people who worked in open office spaces actually experienced increased stress levels, right? 90% of the
Mm.
people. So because of
Like
many,
a cubicle model, you mean? Like
yeah,
just that
exactly.
way?
Exactly,
Oh.
exactly. Because if being stressed out that they won't make it on time, being stressed out because someone's watching them, no intimacy, too loud, this and that. So here
Mhm.
you can definitely focus much more and also prioritize the things that are most important for you. I mean, there are definitely loads of benefits.
Oh, right. Like when I'm at work, I have folks knocking on my office door. There's a pizza party outside my door. Like I want to go get tea. Like there's so many distractions at work. People don't realize that there's probably less at home, so I get more work done. So are there any statistics on the growth of the remote model? Like,
Yeah, there are quite a few statistics. So, well, what we see, what is actually worth evaluating is definitely the number of remote first job offers. Obviously, during the pandemic, there was a spike because, well, there was no option to actually walk into an office physically. After the pandemic, we see a decline. However, this decline after the pandemic is a significant increase compared to what was before the pandemic. So if we
mm,
compare two scenarios that are actually regular, it is going up, and we see it by the job offers. Plus, people obviously they want flexibility. I mean, they will be pushing for flexibility no matter what. And when we talk about flexibility, it can be remote, can be work from home, because remote is a little bit broader, right? You don't have a dedicated place where you have to work, because for example in some countries the legislation looks this way, that you have to have it written precisely what work from home is, like what your location is going to be, whereas in
mm,
others you actually don't have to have it on paper. It can even be a co-working space, can be a cafe if it's fine from a security perspective, data security perspective and everything. So
right.
so we definitely see the increase, and people are definitely interested in that. So
Hmm.
it's challenging times to see what's happening, because there are two sides. Like one is pushing RTO, right, because of the financial aspect that I share. But I mean, people are people. People have their own needs, and I mean, we're all human beings. We're not machines, right? We have to
Right.
respect that too.
Yeah. What are some of the technical skills and soft skills that remote workers should possess to be successful?
Well, definitely they have to be tech savvy. I mean, if you're not tech savvy, and I've experienced that in multiple companies, it's really not about the fact that you can click one button and connect on Zoom. That's just
Mhm.
not going to help you. There are loads of different programs, different software, project management software, communication software, integrations, knowing how to communicate as well, which is like a soft skill, but also, well, yeah, a soft skill, but super essential. You have to be able to communicate in a certain way to keep track of the work, to be able to share information, to be able to share progress, and also to do it in such a way that you accidentally don't allow others for misinterpretation. For example,
Mhm.
if you send the message without any emotional value added to it, like for example an emoji, people who are having a bad day for whatever reason, they may misinterpret it and feel negative after that, which was not your intention. So
Oh.
definitely here you kind of have to try to also get to know the people a little bit better. So even if you're more introverted, then still a practice that I can recommend is definitely when somebody joins a company to create like a how to work with me section, like who I am, what type of personality, how to get in touch with me best, what I like, this and that, to kind of give it a human touch.
Oh, that's awesome. In my workplace, we use Teams and then we'll chat with each other for the most part all day long. So
Yeah.
we'll at each other if we want to get someone's attention, but we just love it. But is it that you think that we should use more emojis like even in emails now? Are you seeing that as a trend?
Yeah, so in terms of emails and formal emails to clients, well, it depends if you know the client. Some clients I already know and I just send emojis because I know them and but it's also me. I mean, I have my own consultancy, so it's also a different story, right? And it's part of my
Mhm.
brand. But then when it comes to the day to day within a team, I would say 100% yes, because I think I in 2021 I gave a keynote speech about it during a conference in Berlin, that the same part of our brain that processes pictures processes emotions. And when we look at our brain, then we also see that our brain recognizes a picture before it recognizes a written text. So
Mm.
if we give this picture, which is an emoji or even a Giphy or whatever, in addition to
Yep.
that, imagine you're a manager and you're sending a message to someone, I have to talk to you. Ooh, like about what? Do you want to fire me? You want to promote me? Is it an issue? Do you want to say
Yeah.
something good? So if they share something positive, then this remote worker on the other side may also have a certain feeling connected to that message that will help them survive the day, especially if it's positive, right?
Oh, yes. In our work, we're so emotional. It's like being in a relationship. I mean, probably even more so for
Yeah.
some of us. So we hang by our seat by, what our boss thinks about us and our coworkers and those we supervise. So yeah, I can completely understand. What about for the companies? How does a company go about finding great remote workers?
That's a very good question. And let me be very straight here. So, not everybody is a great remote worker. Most people want to work remotely, um, but it doesn't mean they will be a good remote worker, because you have to be super accountable for everything that you do, stay on top, of things, and don't take advantage of the system that somebody doesn't see you, because this is actually also causing, the problem that managers today, they suffer from proximity bias. Like they have to
Mm.
see that somebody's working, right? Which is proximity bias. And I actually also published a chapter in a book about it. It's coming out, I think, next month. So highly recommend it to find out more like why we behave this way. So in terms of
Mhm.
hiring a remote worker, it's definitely well, taking a look at people who are doers, trying to find out what their experiences were in the past, whether they already have worked remotely, like what's their attitude towards work. It's very important to make sure that remote work and everybody that you hire is really focused on progress, goals, and output, rather than just sitting there that you have to check on someone constantly. I think
Right.
there are tons of amazing people out there, and it's just about also being super reliant about the goals of the role, and
Mm.
open that this is what both sides are looking for and that both sides are willing to engage into.
Before my current role, I worked a remote position and we would meet every morning for like a 20-30 minutes touch point. Is that sort of a common thing in remote world where you meet and then you go? Like how often do you find that everyone comes together? Is it weekly, every day to
Well, I dare to say that every day is probably too much, and this is
uh-huh.
again coming from proximity bias, that we need to see the people.
Uh-huh.
But I would say, so me, for example, let's say every other day or every week, definitely. It's very important to have like a clear agenda. And also, you know, uh, for me, I used a practice. I think someone shared it with me a few years ago, saying that it's great to start every meeting with this sentence, with the following sentence: this meeting will be a success if. So if we feel that we were all successful after we attended the meeting, then it was a good meeting. If we don't,
Mm.
or if we didn't, then it just was nonsense, right? So I think it is important to have this synchronous communication, but remote
Mhm.
is more about intentional planning. And if it's really like a meeting, then it's to discuss things, to have brainstorming, not just for a status update without any comments, because that can be done in writing or just asynchronously, even like a voice message or whatever.
Are there any websites that you recommend for listeners who are looking for remote work? Are there any of your favorites out there that you
Absolutely. Yeah. So a
recommend?
few of them. So there's this employer of record, they're called remote.com, and they have a remote job section right now. So because if I'm mentioning this because somebody's going to access like, oh, this is not a job board. Yes, it is. You have to click on jobs. There is Job Getter as well. They also have jobs all around the world, and there you can choose whether it's going to be in your country where you live, because in some cases, because of legal restrictions, that's the case. But you can also see roles all around the world.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's possible to select it there. There's also Remote Work Junkie, for example, also like a super nice one to get to know more insights, how to navigate things and so on. There is
Uh-huh.
Remotive as well. Wow. Oh, LinkedIn as well, actually, by the way. So, you check linkedin.com and you just add the remote filter, and there's
Right.
also a lot of stuff.
That's where you hide out. I'm not hide out, but that's your platform of choice, I think, is LinkedIn, right? You're mainly on there communicating with workers that way, huh?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah, 100%, 100%. So,
That's great. I really enjoy LinkedIn as well. So, what else should we know about the world of remote work that we missed?
well, I would say maybe this way: don't give up and don't think that it's over, because it's not. I always like to look back in time and see how, for example, women had no voting rights in the past, and that was considered normal. It was not normal. When Henry Ford was pushing for vehicles, it was said at that time that nothing can replace horses. Well, guess what happened? Okay. It
Yeah.
used to be common that smoking was actually healthy, because there was no proof, no evidence, uh, to actually inform everybody that it's a very bad habit, until it turned out that it was. Um,
Right.
so the same thing. So there's always going to be pushback, and we are in times of change. So don't stop doing something that you believe in and that you're passionate about, and also fight for yourself, for your life, for your balance, because, well, nobody else will do it for you.
Oh, well said. 100%.
Thank
Well,
you.
where can we find you, Nadia?
Oh, you can find me on LinkedIn. Of course, you just mentioned that, right? No surprise, Nadia Harris. But also, you can find me on my website, where there are loads of, well, videos and reels and articles. Remoteworkadvocate.com. Loads of topics, even about finding a remote job. So, well, welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much, Nadia Harris, remote worker advocate from London, in London today. So I appreciate you joining us on Workers Rock.
You're very welcome. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.
That concludes this episode of Workers Rock. Thank you for listening.